Welcome back to the PolicyViz podcast. I'm your host, John Schwabish. I won't lie, folks, it's been a long few weeks. I have been busy with lots of different things, lots of people pulling on lots of different strings as the world has changed, especially here in Washington, D.C. Lots of things have changed in my research agenda and the sorts of projects that I am pursuing and able to pursue. And so I've been a little busy. Been spending a little less time worrying about getting podcasts out the door and writing blog posts about bar charts and pie charts. I've even slowed down on getting my Substack newsletters read and, of course, even written. But I'm back. It's been a little bit of a pause. I've got a backlog of podcasts to get out the door. And so what I'm going to do starting this week is get you 5 more shows for the end of this season. This will be wrapping up the 11th year of the show, 11th season. I've got 5 podcasts. I'm going to do one every week. I'm just going to get them out the door so that you can enjoy all the learnings about data visualization, data journalism, and more. And to kick off this sort of end of the season sprint, I am so happy to be joined by Amanda Cox from now Bloomberg News, previously of the New York Times. Amanda Cox, if you don't know the name, you haven't been working in data visualization long enough. Let me just put it that way. Amanda was one of the originators of modern data journalism at the New York Times. She is a statistician by training. She is just an amazing data communicator and has worked long and hard at communicating data and think about communicating data and data journalism, all the good things that make this field so interesting. And so I was so excited that Amanda was able to sit down with me from her office in New York City and chat with me about her work now at Bloomberg and just reflecting back on the last several years of working in the field and how things have changed and where things are going to go. So I think you're really going to enjoy this episode of the podcast. If you've been working in the data visualization field for a while now, you are going to really enjoy this because Amanda's going to take us on a little bit of a tour. And if you're relatively new to the field, this is an episode you should be listening to because this is going to give you some perspective on where data visualization is now, where it came from over the last, roughly decade or so, and where it's going to go, particularly in the news industry. So I hope you're going to enjoy this week's episode of the show. And here's my conversation with Amanda Cox, only on the PolicyViz podcast. Hi, Amanda.
Hey,
Long
John.
time no see.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, and you have a great view behind you. And now I see the ferries going.
It's classic New York.
It really is.
It really is.
So it's been a while since we chatted, and you I think since we last time we spoke, you're at the Times, and then you went to USAFacts, and now you're at Bloomberg. So I thought we would start by maybe just talking about what you've been doing since leaving the Times. If you want to talk a little bit about USAFacts, and then we can talk about your team at Bloomberg.
Sure. So you are right that when I left the New York Times, I joined this little organization in Seattle called USAFacts, which is a Steve Ballmer endeavor whose mission is to make government data more accessible. He thought government data was too hard to access in answering some of the questions he had about his own opportunities in the world, about kind of connected to some of his philanthropic ideas about what are the gaps, where can my money do the most good, whatever. And so set up this little organization trying to make that data easier to access and to find for people. And so I went out there and spent a little bit of time, about a year and a half, setting up a team to do some more advanced visualization capabilities there. Mm-hmm. And then not super long into that, I got a call from Bloomberg that said, we are going to do a massive expansion in our data journalism, data visualization, and associated efforts. We're going to hire 50 new people. Do you want to come help lead that? And that was a little bit interesting to me. And so I after many months of talking about that with Bloomberg, joined Bloomberg to help run what are called the data journalism teams there, and it's distinct from data viz and Bloomberg structure. So it's more people who are doing reporting around data, analysis with data. I work with a couple of different teams. One of them is mainly focused on investigative projects. One of them brings kind of top tier engineering talent to newsroom journalism stories, and then one of them does some of those things and works on shorter term stories that don't necessarily have an accountability angle, or it's just news stories, right? So
Right.
data journalism at Bloomberg is my remit now.
Nice. Let's talk about USAFacts for just a second. So, were you working on the data collection side, or was there like a team doing that and you were on the more dissemination journalism communicating side?
Yeah, my the team that I worked on, and it doesn't uh was just a little, we're trying to figure out what makes
Yeah.
sense at this organization, really. And so we were doing kind of, I think the nomenclature is special projects, which is like a word that I've come to think, like, I don't actually like it, because I like when you're like core to the institution, right? Like
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
in the same way I think that, like, if you don't have the staff on weekends and holidays in a news organization, you're not actually part of like a news organization, right? Like, or that sort
Yeah.
of, like, if you could just like axe it and it doesn't matter, then it like doesn't really matter. But anyway, but so we were, sometimes collecting our own data, especially because sometimes I think the coolest data, you don't get it. It doesn't come in like a one-click download, or it doesn't come with an ingestion system. Like, it actually requires some reporting. Like, there
Yeah.
was a project that I was fond of that, it was a puzzle. At this point in time, it was still a little bit of a puzzle why car thefts were rising so much in the time when other types of crime wasn't really rising. So like murders were going down a little bit, robberies were going down a little bit, car thefts were up like 20%. I forget what year this is, 2022 or something. And police departments have this data by uh, so we got some clues that it was about Kias and Hyundai's being stolen with USB cords, right? Like, there's a
Oh, right.
TikTok trend that people
Yeah.
talk like in there. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that data by make and model, like the insurance groups had it, but like it wasn't part of real government data, except you could ask police departments for it and they would give it to you. So like, one of the projects that I feel like I left most fond of there was just like the brute force, like, let's just ask 50 police departments for this data. And so like in that part, it's a very long way to say that, like, we did some of our own collection /
Uh,
ingestion, but not in the way that, like, of the like bulk scaling of that like
sure.
USAFacts really dreams about
Right.
doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting, particularly in our current climate around federal data, which we can talk about in a second. How do you make data easier, more useful? I kind of feel like data.gov was the first effort to do this. But there's just so much of it. It's a really hard problem, a real hard nut to crack. Um, so let's turn to Bloomberg. So, um, how does the I guess I'm curious about how, like, your new team, does it expand, extend, broaden what Bloomberg was doing sort of before? Like, what is the goal of that bigger team?
Yeah, I mean, it's more, better, faster, those
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of
yeah,
those sort
yeah,
of goals. And
yeah.
we do, Bloomberg has people, like my colleague David Ingold, who's been doing data journalism at Bloomberg for more than a decade. But it's about turning his team from a 3-person endeavor to a 12-person endeavor around the world, right? Like that sort
Mm-hmm.
of like, I think uh, more, smarter is sort of the big sort of
Yeah.
levers of expansion. Break more news, that kind of idea.
Yeah, it is interesting how, well, let me ask you this way. Like, you've been doing data journalism a long time, like, well, not too long. Let's not age ourselves too much, but like
A long time. It's a
a long
long
time.
time.
So like, what are the big, like, do you view that, we can start here, but like, do you view this expansion as like a kind of like a odd or massive change in the way media works? Like, you don't hear about a lot of places expanding their graphics desks anymore.
Is that true? I don't know. Maybe that's true.
I don't know. Maybe
I
I
think
only read like the Times and the Post and like,
yeah,
yeah,
I mean, the Times graphics department has gotten quite large, right? Like in my era, it was like 25 people, and now I think it's like closer to 50. So like,
yeah,
that could be lies. Don't like, I haven't been there in years
right.
now, but um the I think Bloomberg data is at the core of its identity, and so there are
Mm.
questions about like why are we not the best in the world at this in our newsroom capacity, right? Which is quite different from a lot of other people's jobs at Bloomberg. Bloomberg is a giant organization that
Right.
you trade your assets and you
Yeah.
monitor a law and you do all kinds of things on your Bloomberg
Yeah.
terminal. But why I do think there was some question about like, given what Bloomberg is and what it wants to be in the space of data, like why are we not, we should have more of this and we should be better at it is sort of
Mm.
the, is the thinking behind that
Yeah.
extension.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, they are pulling in. I mean, they are ingesting like a ton of data, right? And they are the best at it probably in the world. Um, so in so then a broader question for you, like in your work, like what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the world of data journalism?
Yeah, I mean, if you define data journalism more broadly than in my current job title, but to like include the world of like data viz in news media,
Yeah.
I do, I have sometimes thought about changes in terms of, or I like to think about it, and I know that you were an economist, so you will like this too, is in terms of like what is the scarce resource? So when I started forever ago, the scarce resource was really front page print columns, right? Like there's only the New York Times as an organization, it's putting out one front page a day. There's only so much space on it, like,
Yeah.
like whatever. Then I think there was an era where the scarce resource, the thing that you had to fight hardest for to get or to save for your best ideas, or sometimes just use as signaling that this is the thing that we care about most, because what do you spend your scarce resource on is the thing that it was web talent for a while, right? Like these
Mm-hmm.
were not jobs who had the world's best developers and engineers and thinkers about what the possibilities are on the web. So like those people, the people who are amazing at that and best in the world at that, they were rare and special, and you
Right.
save them for rare and special things. And that was a fun era because I feel like it was new, and it's always fun when you are like kind of making the rules of the game, or at least it's fun to me. I've come to realize that I like it when the like game's not established enough that you get to like who decides who wins. It's like, well,
Right.
I decide who I win, like I decide what the rules
Yeah.
are. So so first scarce is front page space, physical space in a print product.
Right.
Next era of scarcity is technical skills, like what can we do on the internet, and like in things that were not even possible in print because you're starting to think. And then after that, but that got more that work was popular, so people hire more people who could do that. It got a lot
Yeah.
easier too. The frameworks in the world have made some of that work a ton easier. Like like I am old enough that like I remember a time when making a county map was hard, and now I often say that like I could teach any eighth grader how to make a county map this afternoon, and like
Right.
right like and
Yeah.
so like the tech improvement has about. And then there was an era like what is most special at the times for a little bit was like these things that were called like panel eights, which are like 8 pages of print, right? Like they would, because it was like the front page, especially in the COVID era, and they would put a chart on that like every single day, and not even a
Yeah.
good chart, right? Like not every day, but
Yeah.
like they would put a 4x6 like giant terrible chart with like nothing really behind it on it, like so that
Yeah.
it's no longer print, but it was like big print, right? Print that is so expansive, I can't uh I can't express my idea even in a whole page of newsprint. I need 8 pages of newsprint
Yeah.
back to
Right.
back that I unfold them to express my idea. And I think that's related to like some of the other changes in the work, in that like part of that, I think, at least in part, is a semi like a reaction to mobile, right? Like what's the opposite of 8 pages of newsprint where I'm really
Right.
working about hierarchy and how things like fold together. Uh, and that is not to say, like, I do not believe mobile's so limiting, right? Like I think sometimes we think the era of interactivity uh, was killed by mobile, except people who are really good at mobile interactivity have changed the world, right? Like people
Mm-hmm.
buy houses on mobile phones, people like start relationships on mobile phones, like those are both like people get driving
Yeah.
directions on mobile phones. Like they're very, it's like if you do it right, it is actually, your mobile screen is actually a very expressive medium. But if you do it like wrong, or is an adaptation of, like, it's just a different set of skills. And so,
Right.
I think of that scarce, the changing thing of what is scarce, whether it's about a specific type of print space, whether it's about ability to do things online, whether it's about ability to know how to use the space that, like, your audience is going to encounter in. I think that is one of the evolutions that I have seen in this kind of game, more broadly defined, especially to include the visualization part.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting take on the evolution. What do you see? I mean, if you knew this, you'd be a gazillionaire. But like, what do you see as like the next, or maybe a better way to put this, like, where is your team sort of moving now, looking ahead?
Yeah, I mean, there is this question, like the sort of the era of data viz that I think that I was best at, like, the I define the rules sort of era. That era is
Yeah,
over. It's gone, right? Like,
yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
killed by TikTok.
Yep.
It's like people do not want to consume information in the ways, or not even TikTok, but as a, like, a short form video is like,
Right.
it's like, that's not a game I am good at. But I
Yeah.
do think there are ways the world is changing. Like, I am currently uh, probably too bought into the hype of AI. I think it's changing our work. I think it's changing what's possible. I think it has already changed
Hmm.
that in, like, ability to unlock things at quick speed that have some, like, semi-structured things. I think, I'm to the annoyance of some of my colleagues. I've bought into the hype, right? Like, I've completely, like, I think the world has changed in the last 2 years under our feet, and, like, only 5% of the world knows it. And I am, like, I'm a crazy person in that space, but I think it's, like, unimaginable that space will not or should not change this type of work,
Yeah.
even for
What?
other stuff too. Like, even on the viz side, like, I completely believe that there's a really interesting dance that goes on between, like, text and design options and data choices in visualization, and that, like, defining two of those should get you to, like, getting the third one almost automatically in smart ways. And there's a ton of
Hmm.
people, I believe, who, like, want to be better designers and want to make charts with points, like, as you know in your book. And, like it's one of the, like, I recognize my work is bad and I just don't know how to make it better. And I do
Yeah.
think that we are on the cusp of an era where you can just say, make it, I'm trying to emphasize this, make it
Yeah.
better.
Make it right.
And, make it, and worry about the medium that it's going. Here's the annotations I want to put on. They need to work on mobile. Like, do your best, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
that is a challenge that should be easier by now, in terms
Yeah.
of, like, what is new or going. But also, like, some of what is new is also what is old, which is, like, use this work to break news and figure out stuff about the
Hmm.
world that you couldn't figure out in any other way. Like, some of this stuff is, like, you know specific web frameworks are not going to last, but that core value of, like, we are doing this work to get to a headline, we are doing this work, that is immutable.
Yeah. I wonder, do you view it as potentially problematic in the sense that, do we want to make tools that anybody can do the entire process of data ingestion, analysis, and visualization? Or do you still think that, you kind of do need to know some core things about data and about analysis and about statistics? Or do you think it is going to be sufficient to ask the AI tool to kind of do that process for us?
I mean, I'm a believer in democratization, right? Like,
Hmm.
even that, like, silly county map example, though. Like, I want
Yeah.
more people with real domain expertise, feeling like they can get their ideas done with very little friction. Like, I'm a
Hmm.
total believer in that. Like, are there stupid things you can do with data? Sure. But there are stupid things you can do without data too. So, like, I
Right.
don't view, like, I don't feel like it's a, like, one path, like, is dangerous and one path is not dangerous, in a
Yeah.
way of, like. But
Yeah.
I am a believer that, like, uh I'm a total believer in domain knowledge. People who know
Hmm.
stuff about subjects, they're gonna ask better questions. They're gonna notice better anomalies, and so like I'm a complete believer in reducing friction for people with domain knowledge.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's the reason why I like the tool Canva, right? Because like I'm not a designer, but it lowers that barrier, even on simple things like resizing designs really quickly for different uses. It just democratizes design in a way
Hmm.
because I'm not a designer, and I'm sure there's lots of designers who hate these tools
Sure.
because it potentially takes money out of their hands or work out of their hands, but um,
Or you
not
see it, right? Like you don't get to true greatness, but like there's lots of work that happens
right,
in the world that is like 80% greatness is good enough, or eighty
right,
percent
exactly.
goodness
Yeah,
is
right.
good enough, right? Like
Yeah,
and there is still room for true greatness, right? Like there is
yeah, yeah,
totally room for, and I think the true greatness stands out even more in a way. But yeah,
yeah. So this is my observation of the evolution in the last, I'd say, 10, 15 years maybe of um, uh, data is that, up until a certain point, everything was static. We had Flash, but like everything sort of popular was static. And then like D3 and other open source tools kind of came out, and like everything was interactive, right? You could click on every bar chart and every line chart, and there was a pop up and a hover. And then there seemed to be this big pullback, maybe because people realize it's hard to do with the mobile versus print versus desktop was sort of like really expensive and hard to do. Is that is Do you agree with that? Is that how the sort of pattern that you saw?
I do agree with that. I do think I would note, the era when everything was interactive was not a good era, right? And sometimes when I look back on some of my own work from that era, the version that holds up or comes closer to holding up is the mobile version, where more editing was required. Even at the
Mm-hmm.
time, I think I hated it, right? It was like, why
Mm-hmm.
would I bother? Like, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it is, especially coming at it from a journalism space, is really some of it uh, is about, where we were not great, like UI designers basically. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're pushing work onto people to be like, I sometimes talk about it as like here is some data. I hope you find something interesting.
Yeah.
That kind of like, that is not actually doing like real journalism, like, other than in specialized cases. Like I do think there are some cases where like just opening up that access to people is helpful and good work. And so like there's no blanket statements about what is right or wrong, in any of this. But I would in general agree with your assessment. I think it has made it way harder uh, for people in some ways, getting into the work, right? Like, or because when I started, like I was making bar charts and line charts for print, and
Right.
that work is like very easy to edit. It's very easy to train on. Like it's very easy to say like, okay, you were not good at this, and there was like one version of it. There was one size of it. It was a static
Yeah.
file. It went whatever. It's much harder to edit work from someone who's young and new at this. Like I would not be successful in the current like environment of like make something on the internet and like parts of it move and like your editor doesn't necessarily even know how to edit it, and there's like infinite like possibilities of how all the parameters would go together. I do think like uh there is something I think collectively like a grappling with, like how do people learn how to do this work anymore, like when the on ramp has gotten just a lot harder, I think.
Yeah.
Even though the also because more people are doing the work and it's like more well known even as like a possible career, the pool of people like possibly interested in it is much larger, so like that talent goes up, but the introductory degree of like difficulty and like intro work I think has gotten so much harder.
Yeah. So on that, I wanted to ask. I had a discussion with a grad student yesterday who's sort of getting towards the end of their program and interested in journalism and data visualization, and sort of trying to figure out like what is the right, or what, not the right path, but what is
Sure.
optimal. And I'm curious what you would say to that student, not so much on the technical skills, right? Like, yeah, go learn this tool or that tool, but like, what are maybe the soft skills or the traits that you look for I'll make it a little more concrete. Someone applies for a job on your team. Like, what are the soft skills or what are the intangibles that you're looking for people trying to enter this particular area?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I admire most about journalism as a field is that it's a clips-based hiring process. Like, I'm someone who's, come off of a year of doing a whole bunch of hiring, and I really don't care where you went to college or if you went to college, honestly.
Yeah.
But I do care about seeing work that demonstrates your ability to master some subject master, some domain of expertise, some
Yeah.
command of some subject matter, to that you're brimming with ideas and coming at things with curiosity and able and want to get past like weird roadblocks that you didn't like have a sense of like that you were going to get past. And then there's a bunch of ways to win, right? Like there are people who win at this game by being really excellent traditional reporters. There are
Mm-hmm.
people who win at the game by having top-notch tech skills and ability to turn other people's ability to translate other people's ideas into tractable things is one
Yeah.
one way that people win. Some people win by just being like super pleasant to work with or enthusiastic about about things,
Yeah.
right? Like, and so
Yeah.
I don't think I think there's a ton of ways to win, but the goal is like you gotta publish something, and you want to publish something that breaks news and feels smart, and it feels like you are figuring out stuff about the world, and in all of those things, I believe that the real scarce skill has nothing to do with technical skills. It's about ability to identify good questions, right? Like it's
Mm.
about ability to decide like let's just point all of our energy at that. That is something that like seems like it could pay off.
Yeah. It's funny hearing you talk about this because I'm in the stage. My daughter's a senior in high school, so we're in that sort of college application stage, and it's very clear as we're going through this process that what the schools look for now is different than when I was applying for school. When I was applying for school, it was like, how many clubs were you in, right? It didn't
Huh.
matter how invested you were or like, it was like raw quantity. And they're clearly now looking for quality. They want you to be invested in that thing, the thing that, you're passionate about, the thing that makes you really, sort of, I maybe in the colleges lingo they would call it unique, but like what is that thing that really makes you passionate? It's not about quantity, it's more about quality and deepness. Whereas I kind of felt like when I was applying to school it was like inch mile
Jazz
wide
club
inch deep.
or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like film club. I remember in high school being part of the film club and my mom would ask, do you discuss the films, do you debate them? I'm like, no, we just watch movies, like, um, so it is interesting to hear you say that. It does sort of ring true of what I've been seeing on the college application side, that schools at least are looking for that depth, not necessarily the breadth.
That's interesting. Yeah, I should be careful too, right? Like I think I have been fortunate enough to work at some relatively snobby institutions, so there are people like who would still care. At other places, I do not speak for all of journalism when I say like it doesn't matter if you go to college, right? Like that is totally
Oh
untrue.
yeah,
But
yeah,
like the idea about like what are you creating and what are you really into, and can you demonstrate like enthusiasm and agency about something?
yeah.
And, and
But your
that's
point about being able to ask good questions, I think enables a person to be deep and have domain expertise, but also to be nimble and to
sure.
sort of be able to have domain expertise in some other area as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are journalists who are incredible at that. Who like like you throw them in a field who they know nothing about, and they can find the five people who and make them want to like be helpful to them as sources because
Yeah.
because they're fun to talk to and they feel like you're connecting ideas and you feel
Right.
like there are people and like I that is that doing it through reporting is less my own skill than like just being patient enough to read all the footnotes, right? Like so there's
Yeah.
even in that like there's a ton of different ways to play the game about like how are you going to get to a level of expertise like fast, and like it's
Yeah.
just like what are you most suited for.
So that was another question I actually had for you. Have you found the relationship between sort of the data team, data journalism, whatever you want to call the team, the relationship between the sort of data teams and the kind of traditional reporters, journalists, has that relationship changed over time? And like, how has that changed? Or is it still like reporters go out in the field, they send stuff to you? Like, how has that evolved?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I was so lucky at when I was part of the upshot at the New York Times, and I didn't even realize like how lucky and rare it was in real time, is that we were a team that had people who were traditional beat reporters with domain expertise and sources and cutting edge ideas, and people with data visualization skills. And it was one team. Like the teams did not cross boundaries. And I think
Yeah.
about this a lot. You know, Bloomberg is a giant place with tons of resources, but also like because it is a giant place with tons of resources and many different kind of like semi-overlapping Venn diagrams, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that, like how how do we make those team borders artificial and porous so that it feels like real collaboration in this work? And
Mm-hmm.
most people have no idea what I'm talking about. Like I have a teammate who's fantastic. Who there's this example that we've been fighting about for a year. He was like, "No, that was fantastic collaboration between different people," and I was like, "What on earth? Have you ever worked on a real actual team where people like actually really like respected each other and were like playing that like yes and improv game, and it felt
Right.
safe, and it like no one was, and it was our end product. That is the thing that
Yeah.
I think the best work is, and that is the thing that I am pushing now at Bloomberg, that it feels so much better when it's our draft, like, you know, and our being the people
Right.
who are making things across different disciplines, different skills, whatever. But because I do think there are things like for the best data visualization work, for example, sometimes the reporting needs to be totally different. And there are tons of
Mm.
examples of this that make total sense about, you know, even if you're thinking about like breaking news stuff, like there was a classic one, I think it was like the MH370, I think it is, that plane crash where it was like, you
Mm.
know, it's lost in the ocean. If you're, and you want to know like what are people trying to do to figure out where this plane is. If you
Right.
want to make a map, you want a map, you know, your Git when you're reporting is about a giant spreadsheet of uh, wave heights and wind speeds located across these thousands of miles of ocean.
Yeah.
Like your
Yeah.
Git is a spreadsheet. If you're a traditional reporter, you may be actually chasing exactly the same question, but like you don't want your source to send you a, you know,
Wrong
gigabytes
spreadsheet.
of
Right.
spreadsheet data. Like, you know, it's like just tell me what you see when you look at this data.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to show. And so I think, you know, the reporting like needs to be different to
Mm.
make the actual best stuff. And so what I think I'm trying to do and other people are trying to do is form little teams of people who recognize that, who want in on that, who recognize that you know, I think the other thing about is uh bending, you know, the other thing at the upshot that I took advantage, you know, I didn't realize it. I think I realized maybe a little bit at the time, but how special it was to be like, yeah, I'm going to write the lead of the story taking in mind what the top graphic is, and I'm going to
Mm.
make the top graphic figuring out what the lead is. And both of us might have to bend on that, right? Both
Mm-hmm.
of us might not do the thing that we would do if we were just doing it, if we were playing our own game. If this was a
Yeah.
solo endeavor, I might make different choices. And but I think it's interesting when both parties are willing to bend a little and say like, okay, because we are communicating with all of the tools at our disposal, which include words, which include visual patterns, which may include video or who knows what else. Like
Yeah.
how do I think about how those things are coming together as opposed to like, okay, I made my word draft. Can we insert some pictures into some chunks of it? Like it's just never gonna feel seamless. Is a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a an issue that I face all the time. You know, how do you sort of bridge the gap between the communications sort of team or division or whatever, and the more analyst researcher side, who oftentimes are kind of often talking past each other and maybe don't necessarily kind of fully understand the skills and the pressures and the demands on either side. Like, do you have a strategy when a reporter comes to you or you come to a reporter to sort of try to bring the two sides together?
I mean, part of it is reps and trust, and part of it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
figuring out ways to recognize competence and show up where people are like, this was better this way, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's mushy, and I have no magic answers to this question, and I think it probably the real answers depend a lot on who the people are and what their actual priorities are, and
Mm.
but I do think there is also some insistence on like just this morning I was going on a rant about like if a draft exists and I can't see it, like we're not playing, right? Like this is not worth
Yeah.
my talent, right? Like, and
Yeah.
so that kind of like insisting on being like, oh, we're in this game together, and like you may have completely different priorities than I have, but if we want to actually make it fun, like both gonna have to like show up with some level of ownership. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm very like anti the conveyor belt, like in the situation you described, where it's like, here I've written my blog post and it uses words that like no regular human is going to understand. I top
Yeah.
it over the fence to my communications people, and they
Yeah.
either water it down or do whatever. They like that's not fun for anyone, right? Like
Yeah.
so.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, on that note of fun, this has been great. It's great to see you again. Welcome back to the States. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show.
sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the show. I hope you'll check out the entire catalog of the PolicyViz podcast, which you can check out on my website, policyviz.com. You can check out on Zencaster.com. You can check out on iTunes. And of course, you can find many of the episodes in video form over on my YouTube channel. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to my Substack newsletter, where I write a preview of all of these different shows before they post, along with sneak peeks of what I'm writing, what I'm reading, and other things that I'm thinking about. So until next time, this has been the PolicyViz podcast. Thanks so much for listening.